This is a quick video just showing I have figured out how to change the samples so they repeat good. And if you remember that really frustrating and crummy sounding brrr when I held a note down, I finally figured out how to fix all that, and it was quite a journey, but I'll hold it down and show here. You see that it does a pretty good job right now of repeating the note. So without that stuttering in it. And how I did that, just again, this is more of a reminder of myself, is turns out what I was using was something called sound fonts. And sound fonts have a repeating portion of the wave. It shows where to start the sustain and where to stop the sustain. And I used that to decide when to repeat that loop. So I'll show you what that kind of looks like, but we'll get into Wavesaurus here. And so if I get into here and look at a waveform with my music nerdness, let's get in. I was looking at an organ there, so that's the percussive organ, or a B3 basically organ. Yeah, so if I bring in a wave, so here's a waveform that shows a waveform, and in the waveform itself is embedded a loop start and a loop end. So, and that's part of the sound font does that. So if I look in here, it's got a start and an end. This is the end here. So, and it was just this very short loop at the very end. It said repeat this, and it works fine if in a musical context. If I'm in another piece of software besides Unreal, and if I look at it, let's go look at the loop. Create loop points. Oh wait, I'm sorry. I don't need to create loop points. Can I undo that? Yeah. I need to go look at the loop points. So if I look at them, here's where they were. They started at sample 14,941 and ended at 15,109. They're 168 samples long. Well, that is such a short period of time that the software I wrote, which is here, cancel. So if I look at the software itself, let's stop that. That repeats that loop. So that would actually be the meta sound. If I go look at the meta sound. So if I just look at one of the meta sounds, each key uses a separate meta sound for because that way I can have more of them playing at the same time. If I use the same meta sound, I'll be monophonic. And you've seen this. I think I've shown this before. But basically what it does is it plays the first part of the wave, and then it plays the second part of the wave, and then it plays the third part of the tail of the wave. And what it would do is it basically passes that loop start and loop duration that you just saw in the waveform. I've tableized all that and brought it in so Unreal Engine knows where those are. The problem was they were so short, and a meta sound uses the concept of something called buffers. So it really isn't, you don't have complete control like you do in another piece of software. And so what was happening, the buffers were not long enough, and that caused that stuttering kind of sound because the loops were so short. So I went back in, and I went, for example, if I look at the, so that's what it was, what the loop was, let's say for the C4 organ. And I went back and I said, that's not going to work. And so what I've got here, I'll show it real quick. I keep everything in an Excel spreadsheet for each of the organs, and so, or each of the instruments. And so if I look at it, it's a, come on. So it's got all this information about every note, every MIDI note. And I had sustained, start, and loop. And if you remember, it was like for the C4, where is it here? C4. It was something ridiculous. It was like 14,941 to 15,109 or 168 samples. And that's way too short. So what I did is I went in there and found another crossover point in the loop. I said, hey, start it at 7520 and go for 14,945, and that's like 7,400 samples versus the 168 samples, and that made it longer. And so that gave it enough time for the buffers not to cut it off. So basically, as I made the sustained part of the loop way longer than what the default sound font was, because of the limitations of Unreal Engine. And by doing that, and I have to do that for every sample I bring in. And so, for example, Progressive Organ is using 6 different samples. Piano uses like 10 different samples, and so on. So that, every instrument uses a certain number of samples. And then what it does is it interpolates when it does a pitch shift. Like, so if I wanted to play a D4, it would say, well, take a C4 and raise it 2 semitones. And so, but it still uses the C4, not a D4 waveform. Anyway, that's just neither here nor there. But the point is that after I did that, I was able to get to the point where I had a fairly good sample that would repeat itself, and you heard it. And so it's in good shape now, but that means I just can't use the sound fonts out of the box. I'll have to go in there, and every sound font, every wave file, I have to go in there and choose and play around with and find a good repeating sample portion that's much longer, which will lead to potential artifacts, but it'll sound way better than that repeating stuttering that you heard earlier when I would go ahead and play it. So again, here I am. And going in here, and so again, so in a good example, I don't have volumes here. So I was going to show me playing the organ again, but you've seen that before as well. Basically is and so if I chose a key, remember the old minor pentatonic, so that's a see how much better that sounds. So anyway, that's it. Good progress. There's a lot of music nerdiness that I had to do.